Welcome to this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Ross Pitcoff. He's the managing partner and founder of Pitcoff Law Group, accomplished commercial and business litigator specializing in business divorce, partnership disputes, contractual breaches, fraud, and alternative dispute resolution. Welcome to the show, Ross.
Thank you very much for having me, AJ.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show. Welcome to India in this online form, Ross. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit. A lot of businesses across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk in this backdrop. We'll talk about fame, celebrities, fallouts, business fallouts, as well as legal wisdom. We'll learn all this from you. But before that, let's learn a bit about you, Ross, your background, your journey, so that people know who they are listening to.
Sure, absolutely. And once again, I appreciate the opportunity. I am the founder of Pitcoff Law Group, and we help business owners resolve complex disputes between partners, shareholders, and third parties. We are predominantly based out of New York City and Manhattan, and we also have offices in New Jersey and Florida. I initially started my legal career in 2010. It was a tumultuous time after the crash of 2008. So a lot of those that graduated from law school were really struggling to find and maintain full-time positions in firms. Even public defenders' offices and prosecutors' offices were not hiring because nobody was leaving to open up spaces for young attorneys. So I had a very interesting journey where I got to experience a lot of different types of little boutique firms. I'd worked for a number of different solo practitioners. I did a little bit of litigation. I did a little bit of corporate work, some immigration. I did a little bit of criminal defense, and I started to get a full scope of what it really looks like to practice law. In about 2012, I joined full-time to do insurance defense litigation, which frankly, for me, was not such an exciting topic, but it had me in court every day. Oral arguments before the judges, taking depositions, involving myself with settlements and discovery. So I got a lot of great experience early on. That led to a trajectory of working at a commercial litigation boutique. We did a lot of international work there. We had very complex disputes. We had disputes such as litigation pending in the Mackenzie District Court in Moscow, and then the same dispute having different portions of it taking place in arbitration in London before the London Court of International Arbitration. So there was no shortage of very interesting and intense scenarios that I was involved in. I started my own firm in 2018. I had my car repossessed at the end of 2018, and I recall kind of watching the vehicle, sailing off, saying to myself that this was going to be the moment I would turn things around. And I did. I had really run out of clients because I did no marketing. I wasn't really involved in sales. I didn't have any structures or policies or procedures. And each year from 2019 onwards, I began to experience growth. And especially during COVID, when others were shrinking, I was actually able to grow. And at the end of 2022, we hired our first employee. And fast forward now, about 2.5 years later, we're a team of 15.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Ross, you make things easy for everyone, for businesses, celebrities, and everyone else. So, what is the most challenging part of your job? What makes your job most difficult? Who makes it difficult? Is it the clients, or is it the process of law? Or is it something else?
Well, I think the most challenging part as a practitioner in the legal field, and it's the same with any business owner really, is communication. Being able to communicate properly with the client, to be able to take complex scenarios that are within the legal framework and explain it to them in a very easy to understand way. That's a challenge. Then there's communications with your adversaries when you're in litigation, being able to be strong, professional, show that you're aware of the law and you know it well, but at the same time, being able to create a potential path towards a solution that's going to be beneficial towards your clients. And then as you grow, the third layer of communication that becomes challenging is leading a team. Suddenly shifting from doing everything yourself to relying on others to do things ideally better than you could do them, but ensuring that you're able to say what needs to be said when it needs to be said in a kind but strong way. So that way there's cohesiveness and there's unity. I think the challenge as a business owner is to accept that there is no shortage of difficult conversations you're going to have if you truly want to succeed, not just for yourself, but for the people that you represent and you're advocating for.
Absolutely. And now let me ask you this. For the legal profession, for a litigator, renowned litigator like you, is the legal profession the best of facing the best of times, or is it the facing the very difficult time or worst of times? Because especially with the advent of artificial intelligence, how would you like to put it? How do you see this advent of AI into the legal profession?
Well, as any attorney would adroitly say, the answer typically is it depends. I think that we can look at it through two separate lenses. Some might say that this is something of an atrocity, or that the legal field is going to be changing and it's all for the negative, and there's concerns over if AI is even going to spread accurate information. But at the same time, it's the law of polarity. The opposite is true as well. So I view AI via an injection into the legal framework is something that's exciting. It's something that's innovative. And if the tools are used in an appropriate way, that can not only expedite results, but also ensure that everybody is more educated in the process, then I think AI is a wonderful tool. But either way, even those attorneys or people in the field that seek to resist its use, it's coming. And in fact, we've been, I think, one of the first firms to really take AI into consideration, not only from a legal liability perspective for potential clients, but also use in our own firm and our own processes and our own procedures. So one thing that we've implemented here is we allow the firm and the team to use AI, but we always have to cross-check and fact-check ourselves. In other words, if AI gives us a statute and gives us an analysis based on that statute, that's wonderful. It can help us, but we need to then go ourselves and ensure that that statute really exists and that it says what the AI is telling us that it does.
Absolutely. And you said one of the challenges in your profession is the communication part. With the coming of artificial intelligence, if I understand all the books behind you, all the law books behind you, they will all go into AI, and then you will not have to search for case laws and everything you will have. How will then you be able to differentiate between yourself and your so-called competitors? How would that happen? What is it that will differentiate a litigator or lawyer?
That's a great question. And I think to your point, all of these books and the legal memoranda and the statutory authority and the case law, by being able to eventually search and funnel everything down through AI, there's going to be an ability to expedite the completion of documents, expedite the completion of memos and emails and correspondence and pleadings that are submitted to courts. So the benefit for the client will be that cost should go down because it won't take as much time for legal staff to complete the work that it previously had taken. And then there should be an ability to have very sharp acumen and legal arguments. So funny enough, as time goes on, I think the most important part about work product is going to be less about the production itself and more about asking the right questions to AI and ensuring the right prompts are put into the system. Because if it's the wrong prompts or the prompts aren't done the way that we want to see them, then the legal arguments that are produced might be weakened.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Ross. Now let's come to the legal part of things. In terms of, you see, today's time are very changing. Partnerships are breaking, either in personal life, even in corporate life. People have different views. A startup, cohesive startup today, tomorrow, different founders wants to go different ways. Everyone looks at it very differently. How should then, let's talk about a small business scaling up, trying to be big. What are the things that even a small business in today's time should take care of, so that, tomorrow, today, even partners, husband, wives are partners, friends are partners, others are partners, but tomorrow it may not be the same way everyone will do. Again, it will be loss of communication, a lot of things will get lost in translation, miscommunication, misguidance, and a lot of people will perhaps become greedy. We do not know human nature. How do you protect yourself from your small business going forward? Are there some ways you would want them to be, careful today, happy tomorrow?
Well, that's a great question. And I think that from our perspective, litigating a lot of claims, we've been able to learn a lot of the pitfalls that happen when people don't properly put their businesses together at the beginning. And that's the reason why we also have a corporate transactional practice that focuses on removing the potential possibilities for disputes through agreements. So, really, step one is we always tell clients that are considering going into business together, number one, ensure that you register an entity, whether it's a limited liability company, whether it's a corporation. Of course, outside of the US, there's LTDs and all different types of entity structures. But the general idea is the same, that provides a shield from liability for the individual. So if somebody winds up suing you, if they sue the company, they can't then attach to your home and other personal assets. But number two, and this is probably the most important part and the part that we deal with the most with clients, is drafting an operating agreement for the partnership. So it's very important at the very beginning to lay out the foundations of who owns what equity and how is that equity going to be placed into the business. Is it via capital? Is somebody making an investment? Is it going to be sweat equity? Are the partners working for the business? Is it going to be a mix of both? And then how do we allocate ownership over time? Does ownership stay? Will it be shifting year to year based upon productivity or based upon one partner's active participation in the business? Beyond that, we also want to ensure that the roles and responsibilities of the partners are very clearly written. So, for example, we've seen many businesses start with 50-50 equity ownership. The expectation is that both partners will work for the business. Well, that's fantastic, but what are the partners supposed to be doing? Is one focusing on sales and the marketing and the other dealing with operations and the financials? If this isn't packed out and unthought early on, there could be a lot of confusion moving forward, which then leads to resentment, which then leads to confrontation over who's supposed to be doing what. And before you know it, you have two individuals that now have pitted interests against each other, and you tend to have a complete breakdown of the business partnership relationship. We also like to include certain provisions in these types of agreements, such as lock clauses, break lock clauses, which provide a scenario where if the partners are not getting along and a vote is not going to clear the way for moving forward, a third party is automatically appointed. So that way that third party can be the one to render a decision. So things like that are important when starting a business.
Absolutely. So, Ross, in some cases, not all, but some cases, and when you are a small company, when not many people know you, there are not many people who are watching you. But if you become successful, there can be, lawsuits from various directions. One could be a disgruntled employee long before, maybe something, even employees who can charge you with certain things, sexual harassment or any of those things, and that can be, difficult. Are there some of the things that small business owners who are going on the higher growth path, they can take today, so that they are protected also in the future? It will happen, but only maybe in some, but you don't know which one. So I just want to understand from that perspective.
Sure. No, that's a great question. And I think it's a mix of legal and non-legal mixed together. So number one is it's very important from the beginning to establish the culture of the firm or the business. And often we'll see that in the business's core values. What do they really stand for? And assuming all of those are positive and good, which is what we want any business to do, because business is really just people producing for society to help others be in a better position than they were in before, then the culture should be off to a good start. When you hire and start to grow, everyone that's brought into the business should be aligned with those core values. If they're not, this is what could potentially set things up for future disputes and potentially ramifications such as what you mentioned. And then as the firm grows, it's important to have procedures in place through an HR lens to know that there is an avenue for somebody who does feel uncomfortable or who's not feeling that their voice is being heard to speak to a third party within the company to discuss these issues so that they can be dealt with and hopefully resolved amicably. And then as the firm grows, or as the business grows, you can come up with ways not to preclude any type of publicity litigation, but in your employment agreements, for example, you can have arbitration clauses that make clear that if there is any dispute arising out of employment, then the parties are going to go to a private arbitration. And that's not to say it's not simply to protect the employer fully from the public scope. But at the end of the day, sometimes there really are miscommunications, and employees and employers just aren't on the same page. But the second a lawsuit gets filed publicly, of course, no matter what, that company itself is going to come under scrutiny and potentially really have a damaged reputation. Maybe it's warranted, maybe it isn't, but the arbitration realm, so long as it's a claim that can stay in arbitration, can mitigate that.
Absolutely. And one more point here is about if spouses, two of them, husband, wife, or two partners, they form a company. And when they are partners, they are husband, wife, at that point in time, it does not look like, if the world is so good, everything is good, and you may forget to talk about the difficult things while setting up business. And it grows. And we see several of these cases, a lot of money has exchanged there. What are the things one should take, or especially when you are in the US or someone from India going and opening a business with their partners in the US? What are the things that they can take care of so that there is not much acrimony, personal acrimony, at least when there is a bit of, distance between these two people, so that their interests are also protected? And so how should one go about this, Ross?
It's a great question, and we certainly do see it here often as well. And in fact, it's not unusual for there to be a divorce action that's pending, and then separately we're contacted to focus on the business component of a business that the couple previously was operating together. I would say that although it's not comfortable, if couples are going into business together, it's very important to also do what we recommend that all businesses do, which is have a separate LLC or corporation, and then have a separate operating agreement that outlines the roles and the relationship between the two partners within the business scope. You could also include additional clauses in that operating agreement in the event of a divorce. So you could even have a provision that states that one partner agrees to buy out the other partner if it comes to the point that the marital relationship is now dissolved. And that way we can ensure that the business can survive even though the couple is no longer together. So one couple will leave, but the other company will compensate that other partner in the marriage for that. So even though it's not the most comfortable conversation to have, just like a prenuptial conversation is not comfortable to have, ensuring that you have a written agreement for the protection of the company itself is imperative.
Absolutely. And now let's come to the celebrity part of it. It makes a lot of news. People watch them and people form their own opinion about all these celebrity legal battles. So some people may be correct in their opinions. Some people may have their own misconceptions about this. So help us understand, some common misconceptions that people may have about celebrity legal battles, Ross.
Well, I think it's a very large scope, celebrity legal battles. Certainly, we've seen the Johnny Depp dispute that took place very publicly. We've seen a lot of claims arising out of defamation. And then we just see regular litigation that just because these individuals are celebrities, everybody seems to know about it. But the most interesting component of celebrity litigation through the lens that I see is really the issue of defamatory statements and the fact that these individuals are public figures. So normally a claim for defamation is a statement that's relayed to a third party that's false. And the person that's making that false statement, if it turns out that they knew that it was false, then they could be held liable. But if they just made a mistake, if it's a private citizen who you're talking about, even if they just made a mistake, they could be held liable. But if it's a celebrity and the person just happened to make a mistake, then they not necessarily be held liable. So in other words, celebrities have a much harder time enforcing their rights when somebody makes a statement about them that's potentially false. And that's because so many people talk about those that are in the public light, the newspapers, the journalists, everybody's focused on celebrities. So celebrity litigation, ironically, it's harder when you have a public figure to be able to say that I've been defamed. So when we watch these big cases involving these celebrities or even politicians that are running into court and suing, they have a higher threshold to prove their claims than a private individual would. So to me, that's a very fascinating portion of publicity and defamation with celebrities. And I will add, we're seeing this now come up in different ways. You're looking at likeness, using somebody's public likeness without their authority or consent in order to earn income. We just saw a scenario via AI where an influencer now on TikTok had her likeness taken via an AI bot. So it wasn't even a real person, but it looked like her, it sounded like her, it spoke like her. And then this fake human being was in a commercial advertising a product. So now that product that chose to take her likeness could certainly be held liable for benefiting financially off of this individual's personality and her image, even though the image used was actually completely fake. So it's really fascinating what's taking place in the public realm now.
Absolutely. Very fascinating. And I sometimes think of these artificial intelligence companies. You see, several of the times they may take my image, they may not put my full image into one particular thing, but my whole image will be broken into millions of pieces, and that will be pulled out for different prompts, image prompts that others will put it. And likewise, from 1% to 5% to 20% to 200%, it will pull out one thing or the other and bring in a new image. How does that look like? Do you think we'll ever come to that point that every single piece of every single person that has been taken by AI, you can, go back and say this has broken my level of, my breached into my personal security privacy? How does that look like, or is it too far-fetched off, Ross?
Well, I think it's fascinating. And I think that over the next 2, 5, 10, 15 years, we are going to see cases like this litigated, certainly in the US system, because these are novel questions of law. There isn't any precedent to be set when you're taking a microcosm of a human being's image and then using that and injecting it into something that's much larger. So I can't predict the outcome of what all of this is going to look like. But, just like they used to say, within the universe, we're all stardust. And now AI is sort of pulling all of that in and making this a true reality to kind of create an amalgamation of the whole. I think it's going to be very interesting where courts go with this, or if there's statutes that are set forth. But as of now, this is a completely novel direction, and it's the wild, wild west.
Absolutely. You see, if it were text, if AI creates some text, then within the text, you can find that, okay, that is a bit of, duplicacy somewhere, some sort of, copying there. And you will at least go and correct it or rephrase it or do it. But in images, it is still to be achieved. If if there is a way one can look at, be that as it may, what about social media? When in all these businesses, earlier it were the newspapers, it were, the television media, you could hold them accountable in one way or the other. The court had some control, but now it is social media, millions and millions of social media influencers and everyone they talk about. And not only in one place where the case is happening, either it's a big business case or even celebrity case, everyone it becomes. How do you handle this whole pressure of social media talking about a celebrity case or a high profile business case? What is the advice here for people who are dealing with this? What is the advice here for social media also, that if that there can be implications in future?
Well, I think, unfortunately, there needs to be a lot of monitoring. I think it's very important that people are taking note of whether or not their likeness or their images or their videos being captured and utilized anywhere else. If it is, then that's the time when, certainly in our system, you send a cease and desist letter to force somebody to stop the use of a public image or your image generally for any financial gain elsewhere. And then you can envision a future where this is run so rampant that you have injunctions being filed in court all the time to stop people and stop companies and stop individuals from improperly using likeness. And another consideration is that this is now a global phenomenon. So how do we know and locate and find the actors that are actually the ones behind a lot of this, let's call it IP appropriation? And therefore, then we need to hold the channels themselves accountable to do some sort of level of their own monitoring. So I envision a very complex future where all of these channels will either require consents for reproduction of an individual's images, videos, etc., which I would strongly suggest that people do not consent to. And if there is no consent and these things do take place, then the social channel itself can also be held liable for what's taken place. And maybe then there'll be some sort of additional crackdown through the platforms such as Meta and such as YouTube and such as TikTok to mitigate this type of rampant IP violation.
Absolutely. And now coming to your own business yourself. Traditionally, legal profession, at least in India, we don't see them marketing themselves too much. They're not very aggressive, or maybe I don't know, different laws are there that you cannot market, or don't know. I'm not very sure about this. How should legal profession lawyers should look at going forward in terms of getting clients? If you sit in the office and if you think that your reputation will bring clients, perhaps that will not be entirely true for everyone. How do you see the legal profession itself changing, at least from the US perspective? Do you think lawyers and everyone related to, they will go on actively marketing it like any other person, any other product or service? How do you see that?
Well, it's an excellent question. And I think historically, lawyers tend to be awful marketers simply because they're never taught this when they're going through law school. In fact, the whole ethos of an attorney is to focus on worst case scenarios. So a lot of lawyers shy away from doing things that are perfectly legal and perfectly proper because of the concern of the what if everything goes wrong, because that's really what lawyers plan for all the time. In fact, there's a phrase we always use, that we plan for the worst and hope for the best. But through the modern marketing framework, there is nothing that precludes an attorney from promoting themselves. They just can't solicit directly if somebody's been injured. And you hear this with the ambulance chasers as the example. But somebody's in a car accident and you have the attorney running over to where the poor person is lying on the ground saying, "Here, take my card." You can't do that. But you certainly can promote your services generally to the public. And in fact, I do believe that we have a duty to do so, to allow the public to become aware of how they can get help. Because just like any other business, we're in the helping people get an outcome, something that they want that they don't have. So certainly the digital component of marketing is something that a lot of the newer generation of attorneys are really beginning to use. And it is essential if they want to get their name out so they can be seen.
Absolutely. And one last question I want to, what about justice? When we talk of legal profession, when we talk of, judges, when we talk of the legal system, we also talk about justice. Do you think with the present apparatus and every technology that is available there, a common person will be able to seek justice, or will it be only about money, who has access and everything? And if you have to seek justice, better is, don't go for it. Just try to see what you can get directly from someone whom you have a dispute with. How do you see that point of from a common person's perspective? The impression generally is that common person is getting a bit more, disenchanted from the legal system in so many places across the world. We keep on reading stories about it.
Sure, no, and I think there's always been a difference between what's morally correct and legally correct. People sometimes tend to assume that those align, and oftentimes, unfortunately, it isn't the case. One thing we do here is justice is a very important portion of the way we approach every matter, because again, we want to put someone in a better position than they were in than when they came here. If we haven't done that, then we haven't really done our job. I do think that as AI offers more information, and not just information, the internet offered the information. AI now offers a computation of that information that can actually help the common person set up an argument. It can help the person prepare a brief to go to court. It does sort of democratize the legal field to an extent. Unfortunately, there still is the oral advocacy component that is required. It tends to be required to go before judges. There also is the reality in the business setting, at least, that companies can't represent themselves in court. They need to hire outside counsel. So I think that depending on the field that one's in, there is a democratization that is taking place right now. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easy for somebody to represent themselves, but they now have tools and abilities to ask for a complaint to be written, to ask for a memorandum of law to be written for them, and at least a cohesive argument can be made in their favor, all without having to hire an attorney.
Absolutely. So, Ross, there is much to learn from you, and I'm sure a lot of people would want to connect with you. Who is the ideal client that that you would be ideal for, especially in the US, outside the US, especially from India, businesses, individuals, people are a lot of India people are in the US, and a lot of Indians do business with the US. How would you like to tell them about your services, about your client?
Sure. And even though we're here based in New York, New Jersey, and Florida, South Florida, Miami, we're not solely limited to U.S. work. So we deal with a lot of cross-border transactions, and we also deal with disputes via international arbitrations. So for us, it's really anybody that's in business. People that own businesses are looking to begin a business and start a business. People that have privately held companies where they have staff and employees, and they already have procedures in place, but they might need some guidance, some regulatory guidance. They might need some guidance about their employment agreements. And of course, which we hope it doesn't happen, but it tends to, any businesses that are having disputes, whether with third-party vendors or potentially internally within their own partners. And that's that partnership dispute business divorce component of our business. So if you're in business, we always are happy to speak with you and have a dialogue and see how we can help.
Right. And what's the best way for them to connect with you?
So our website is pitcofflawgroup.com. It's my last name, PITCOFF, group.com. You can also email us. My email address is ross@pitcofflawgroup.com, and we have a team of 15 that's here looking to assist and help those that are in need.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KAJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, AJ. Appreciate it.